Hello everyone, B.O.B. here, and welcome to another Minecraft video. And today we're going to talk about bubble tubes, basically just how they work and a few different ways you might go about building them. Now, just as a brief explanation, these are bubble tubes. You can see they're just tubes of water. One has soul sand at the bottom, one has a magma block at the bottom. Um, Now, the bubbles coming up through the water, well, bubbles from a soul sand push you up. Bubbles from the magma blocks will drag you down. And this works for all entities. That means mobs, dropped items, anything along those lines. Um, if you saw my video about item management, I did talk a little bit about item elevator bubble tubes, but this is more focused on actual player elevator bubble tubes. Now, see, if you ask me, these are the most reliable and probably the fastest elevators in the game you can build in Minecraft. And I believe that's true for like all versions. Now there are some pretty quick piston elevators, but yeah, I've never had the best of luck with reliability of those. So I tend to stick with these bubble tube elevators for ones I want to use on a regular basis. Now these models here are about as basic as you can make these things. It's just two separate tubes. One tube sends you up, the other tube sends you down. And as you can see, I have glass panes on each side of the water block containing the water there, and you can easily walk between those since they're not connected on the corners. Um, but of course, you can use different things to hold the water back, like buttons, pressure plates, but those get a little bit annoying. Of course, fence gates and signs. Whatever method you would typically use to hold back water. You don't use to create your doorway into your bubble tube. Now, these models I like because um, they're a lot easier to fill than a single block bubble tube. You got one side sends you up, the other side will bring you down. You got sort of your dead zone here in the middle. And now what makes these really easy to, well, what makes these easier to fill, it's having the three wide structure. It allows you to create infinite water sources at each level. And of course you could achieve this if you created one that were 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. But yeah, a basic 3 by 1 bubble tube, you could put a water source on each block, and then this block in the middle becomes a source, so you can then draw from that and then fill up the level above, and then draw from the center block, fill up the level above, and so on and so forth. And that way you only need 2 buckets of water, and you don't have to leave or anything like that. Just continue filling the whole way to the top. But filling up a single tube with water isn't actually all that difficult. You could just go ahead and start off at the top. Just dump a bucket of water on that top block, and then you could swim that down to the bottom. And if you notice, I have a sand block underneath here to start off with. That's because we wouldn't be able to place kelp on top of a soul sand or magma block. But so you'll start off with sand there in at the bottom, and then you just place kelp the whole way up through this tube. And in creative, that might not be that, or in survival, I'm sorry, that might not be that easy. You might be running out of breath, but you could always just swim to the top and come back to where you last left off. But once that is completely full, now each one of these water blocks is a water source. So we can go ahead, we can get rid of that kelp, and we can get rid of that sand and replace it with our soul sand, and we've just created a bubble tube, as you can see. But the easiest way to fill these things is this stuff right here. And that almost applies for whatever type of bubble tube you're building. But ice is just so useful for these things. You could just stack jump. Stack jump the whole way up through the tube. And then break your way back down. Obviously it won't work for me because I'm in creative mode. But in survival, you'd be breaking all that back into water. Once you reach the bottom, if it's magma, of course it'd be dragging you down, or the soul sand would be pushing you up. So if you're getting trapped up there, you might want to make sure you got a way back down. Now let's say you just want one tube that can send you up and pull you down. Well, That's where some redstone comes into play. Pay no attention to these buttons here on the glass. They're just holding back the water. Uh, but what we do have here is a time system. So at default, it's got the magma block underneath the bubble tube. So it's always pulling down. So you'd be activating this from the bottom floor. So you could just hit your button. You can see it switches to soul sand, and it'll push you up for a little while, and it gets you pretty much just enough time to get up there, and that's about 10 blocks. But just to demonstrate, I'll hit the button. See, I got just enough time to get up here, and it switched back, and it's now the magma block, so I can drop back down here and come back out. Oop, better make sure I leave the right direction. uh, but this was a concept I believe I originally saw Mumbo Jumbo do. You see, it's just one sticky piston with two slime blocks on the end, or of course you could use honey blocks. And like I said, you'd want the magma block to be set at your default uh, underneath the bubble tube here, and then right next to it you'd want your soul sand. And then just have all of this powered by a simple wood button. You definitely want to use a wood button for the longer pulse, and we're even sending that through a pulse extender using 4 comparators, kind of gone in a loop. Now you'd have to experiment with different pulse extenders depending on different heights of elevators, but like I said, this one here is 10 blocks, so anything 10 blocks and under, this one should do just fine. But then I have that signal feeding into a repeater that's just feeding into this solid block, and then that's powering that piston. Just one more demonstration so you can see the redstone at work. You can see that's all on. When the piston retracts, it brings all those blocks back to normal. Now this is another way we can use redstone to make these things work for us. So as you can see, I just got 2 pistons underneath here, and you see I got my soul sand here and the magma blocks underneath the water tube. So if I just extend this piston, it's going to put that soul sand underneath the water tube. So now I can go up, and you notice the torch tower off the back there, so I can then activate this from up here. I can hit this button, it'll send a signal down, switch it back over to the magma block, and I can go back down. And the first person I saw doing it this way was Wattles, and he actually had a very detailed tutorial, including a little ejection system at the top. And I'm going to include a link to his tutorial in the description down below, but just to give you a brief rundown of how it all works. See, I got a very simple torch tower coming down off the back, and then that is powering the piston, which will push the magma block underneath. And then, yeah, this one here, it's just the block right on top of the piston that has the button on it. So there's no real redstone there, just put a button on a block. But yeah, real simple to do. Like I said, Wattles has a much more detailed tutorial, and his was a much nicer looking one. So if you want a more detailed tutorial on that, I'm going to link his video in the description. And so, my friends, that completes today's video on bubble tubes. And if you enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, please remember to hit that like button. And if you're interested in seeing more from me, remember to hit that subscribe button as well. I do have a few series in the works right now. There's a few new things coming up, as well as I'll continue doing these tutorials. Also, if anybody has requests for tutorials they'd like to see in the Bedrock edition of Minecraft, please let me know about that in the comments below. I would like to thank each and every one of you for watching and wish you all a wonderful day.